Rafael Nadal just shattered his legendary silence, an act that sent shockwaves through the tennis world, and its implications run deeper than you can imagine. We've always known Nadal to be a man who operates above the fray, steering clear of social media skirmishes, sidestepping public squabbles, and refusing to engage with the hot takes of coaches or commentators. He transcends the noise, a pillar of quiet dignity who has always preferred to let his monumental legacy do the talking. And so he moved, in stoic silence until now. Patrick Mouratoglou uttered something so ludicrous, so profoundly disrespectful, and so utterly untethered from reality that it pierced even Rafael Nadal's impenetrable calm. The celebrated coach, famed for his work with Serena Williams, released a video asserting that Jannik Sinner is superior to Novak Djokovic in every single aspect of the game, save for mental fortitude. He claimed that the rising stars of today possess a higher level of tennis skill than the big three ever commanded. He argued that a single match result was meaningless, serving only to confirm his pre-existing convictions, and Nadal's reaction? A masterclass in public mockery. He dropped a series of laughing emojis under Mouratoglou's video, a digital spectacle for the entire tennis community to witness. This wasn't a thoughtful counter-argument or a measured critique. It was raw, unfiltered laughter at the sheer absurdity of the statement, the emoji equivalent of a stunned, "You cannot possibly be serious." Mouratoglou's controversial Instagram video insisted that Djokovic's victory over Sinner in the Australian Open semifinal was no proof of the Big Three's superiority. He insisted that Sinner is quicker, his shots are more powerful, he strikes the ball sooner, and his serve is mightier than Djokovic's. Mouratoglou then doubled down on his claim, declaring, "Novak is not a superior tennis player to Sinner, but he is the most formidable competitor the sport has ever seen." When followers accused him of having an immense ego, Mouratoglou shot back, engaging in personal arguments with users. The legendary Boris Becker even entered the fray, telling Mouratoglou, "I believe you stand alone in that opinion." In a defiant retort, the French coach proclaimed that his analysis is built on his own expertise, not on the shifting sands of popular opinion. While Nadal eventually removed his emoji comment, the digital ink was already dry. The internet had immortalized it, and the ridicule had already gone viral. This entire affair transcends a mere disagreement about who holds the title of better player. At its core, this is a matter of respect. This is a story about a coach whose fame was forged on the achievements of others, now attempting to dismantle the legacy of tennis's greatest era simply to appear clever and controversial. This is about a man who should understand the game better than most, making claims that are so flagrantly false that even Rafael Nadal, the man who never wades into these waters, felt an overwhelming need to publicly laugh in his face. Let's dissect the precise words Mouratoglou used and explore why they were so monumentally absurd that they finally drew Nadal out from his self-imposed social media exile. Mouratoglou's whole argument ignited from Djokovic's win against Sinner in the Australian Open semifinal. Most observers viewed that contest as definitive proof that even at 38 years old, Djokovic could still go toe-to-toe with the world's elite young talent and emerge victorious. It suggested that the supposed chasm between the Big Three in their glory days and the current generation might not be so vast after all. But Mouratoglou embraced the polar opposite interpretation. He declared that anyone who saw Djokovic's victory as proof of the Big Three's dominance was suffering from a case of extreme short-sightedness. He insisted that one match couldn't possibly invalidate his observations from the last few years, pointing out that Sinner had won his 5 previous encounters with Djokovic. Therefore, this single defeat was utterly insignificant. Now, that's a debatable but still somewhat plausible opening stance. But from that point, Mouratoglou veered completely off the edge of reason. Jannik's movement is faster, his hitting is harder, he takes the ball earlier, and his serve is better than Novak's, Mouratoglou pronounced. Novak simply possesses the most powerful mentality in tennis history, and that was the deciding factor. Novak is not a better tennis player than Sinner, but he is the greatest competitor in history. Just allow that statement to permeate your thoughts for a second. According to Mouratoglou, the man with 24 Grand Slams, the icon who has held the #1 ranking longer than any human in history, the champion who has conquered all 4 majors repeatedly, the titan whose winning record stands as a fortress against nearly every opponent he's ever faced. That man somehow is not a better tennis player than Jannik Sinner. No, he's just mentally superior. His technical game is supposedly inferior. He just, by chance, is extraordinarily skilled at the act of competing. Can you grasp the sheer insanity of that position? How does Mouratoglou imagine Djokovic amassed 24 Grand Slam titles if his actual tennis abilities are weaker than the current generation's? Was it purely through grit? Did he mentally dismantle his opponents? Did he just get lucky 24 separate times? And that, right there, is the reason Nadal laughed. The assertion is so preposterous it doesn't warrant a serious counter-argument. It warrants ridicule. It warrants a string of emojis that scream, "I am in utter disbelief that you voiced this thought publicly." The specific emojis Nadal chose were a stroke of genius, too. The blushing face with a hand clamped over its mouth, the eye peeking through fingers, and then a cascade of 3 consecutive laughing faces. That sequence is the digital equivalent of saying, "I'm genuinely embarrassed for you. I can barely bring myself to look at this, and I'm laughing so uncontrollably that it requires 3 separate emojis to convey my amusement." Nadal is famously absent from the daily chatter of tennis discourse. He avoids the endless arguments over legacies, the comparisons between eras, and the debates about who is greater than whom. He has stated on numerous occasions his dislike for comparing different generations, believing people should simply appreciate the present moment without constantly weighing it against the past. But this was a bridge too far, even for Rafael. This wasn't a simple comparison of generations. This was a profound insult to everything the Big Three had ever achieved. It was a narrative that claimed their tennis was inferior, that their legendary success was merely a product of mental games. As if mental fortitude isn't one of the most critical pillars of greatness in the world of tennis. And Nadal, more than anyone, knows the sheer, grinding effort that he, Federer, and Djokovic poured into reaching their godlike status. To diminish the decades of skill, talent, and relentless refinement it took to dominate by suggesting today's players are simply better is an offensive dismissal of their entire legacy. Because there's a fatal flaw in Mouratoglou's entire premise. At the height of his power, Djokovic himself was the one hitting harder, moving faster, and serving more brilliantly than anyone on the planet at that time. The sport is always evolving, training methods advance, and racket technology marches forward. While today's players certainly have advantages over those from 20 years ago, Djokovic didn't win his 24th Grand Slam in a bygone era. He won it recently, clashing with the very same players who supposedly have superior tennis, and for the vast majority of his career, he has systematically beaten them. That is not simply mental warfare. That is being a superior tennis player. The argument that Sinner won more total points in their Australian Open semi-final yet lost the match is particularly nonsensical. Mouratoglou uses this statistic as proof that Djokovic's tennis is lacking, that he only triumphed by winning the big, decisive points. But winning the moments that matter times the art of tennis. That is the very soul of the contest. You cannot surgically separate playing great tennis from winning the points that decide the outcome. That's like saying a world champion boxer isn't truly skilled. He just has a knack for landing punches at precisely the right moments. Djokovic seized those crucial points because his court positioning was sublime, his shot selection was genius, his pressure management was unparalleled, and yes, his iron will allow him to execute when it counted. All of these elements are the fabric of tennis. They aren't additions to tennis ability, they are times tennis ability. And Nadal understands this truth more profoundly than anyone, because he has lived and breathed it. He has fought in innumerable battles where the total points were razor thin, or where his rival had more winners. But Rafa prevailed because he was transcendent when the match hung in the balance. Was he not the better tennis player in those moments? Of course he was. The suggestion is preposterous. The response from other tennis titans was both swift and damning. Andy Murray, who faced the Big Three throughout his entire career, simply dropped laughing emojis on the Mouratoglou video. That's 2 members of the Big Four essentially declaring this to be utter nonsense. Boris Becker, who has seen every generation of the sport and coached Djokovic himself, chimed in with a pointed retort. "Patrick, I think you're alone with your opinion." Minor typo aside, Becker's point was a dagger. Mouratoglou is isolated in this bizarre worldview. The people who actually lived it, who competed in that epic era, and who truly know what it took to triumph, are not on his side. They are laughing at him. And Mouratoglou's response to Becker was incredibly revealing. "I never made an opinion based on what people think, but out of my own opinion." That is just a polished way of saying, I don't care if every expert on Earth thinks I'm wrong. I'm going to keep broadcasting this belief anyway, which is his right. Everyone is entitled to an opinion. But when your personal take directly contradicts the collective wisdom of multiple all-time greats who were actually in the arena, maybe it is time to reconsider whether you've found a revolutionary truth or are simply being a contrarian for attention. because this feels exactly like the latter. Mouratoglou has constructed an entire brand around inflammatory takes and controversial positions. He is the coach who makes headlines, who defies conventional wisdom, and who paints himself as the one true prophet of modern tennis while everyone else is trapped in the past. And at times, that contrarian approach can produce genuine flashes of brilliance. Mouratoglou is capable of legitimately superb analysis. He deeply understands the art of coaching and what fuels a player's success. But at other times, his approach just leads him to say foolish things to generate a shockwave. And proclaiming that Sinner is a better tennis player than Djokovic, but a worse competitor, is one of those incredibly foolish things. The notion that Alcaraz and Sinner possess no weaknesses, unlike the big three, is equally flawed. Mouratoglou has claimed before that this new generation is more complete, that they are devoid of the weaknesses that plagued past champions. Is he serious? Was Federer's backhand a weakness? Was Nadal's serve a weakness? Was Djokovic's forehand a weakness? We are discussing some of the most complete athletes in the annals of sport. You do not accumulate over 20 Grand Slams each if you are burdened by glaring, exploitable flaws that prevent you from winning. Of course, they each had shots that were comparatively less potent than the other weapons in their arsenal. Federer's backhand wasn't the force of nature his forehand was. Nadal's serve was not his most fearsome weapon. But to call these aspects weaknesses in any meaningful way is utterly absurd when all three men conquered every surface against every kind of opponent imaginable. To even whisper that Alcaraz and Sinner are without flaws is beyond ridiculous. These are phenomenal athletes, certainly, but they've fallen to competitors ranked outside the top 10. They've had entire tournaments where their mortality was on full display. They possess clear vulnerabilities in their play, chinks in the armor that the right opponent with the right plan can absolutely shatter. In stark contrast, the big three, at the zenith of their power, were something close to invincible. There were entire seasons when Djokovic, Nadal, or Federer would seize 3 of the 4 major titles, boasting 80-plus match win percentages, where defeating them demanded a flawless performance and a dose of pure luck. Alcaraz and Sinner are brilliant, but they haven't touched that stratosphere of utter domination, not yet. Perhaps one day they will. The raw talent is undeniable, but they lack the proof of sustained greatness over a decade, a feat the big three made look routine. Mouratoglou's argument also conveniently sidesteps the brutal reality of the competition they faced. The big three were locked in a perpetual war with each other. In any given tournament, a victory meant battling through at least one, and more often 2, of the other titans just to lift the trophy. This is the very reason their Grand Slam totals aren't even more astronomical. They were constantly taking titles from one another. Alcaraz and Sinner are facing each other in a field of very talented, but not legendary, players. While the tour has impressive depth, there is no one else currently operating on their same plane. During the prime of Djokovic, Nadal, and Federer, you were guaranteed to face at least 2 other gods of the sport on your path to a major title. That is a monumental difference, a truth that Mouratoglou's so-called analysis brazenly ignores. What makes this entire episode truly captivating is the fact that Nadal later erased his emoji-laden comment. It remained visible just long enough for the entire world to capture it, to screenshot it, before it vanished from Mouratoglou's feed. What drove Nadal to delete it? Perhaps he decided it was a petty gesture, beneath him. Or maybe an advisor warned him that public mockery on social media could tarnish his legacy. It's possible he simply wanted no part in the unfolding drama. But the act of deletion makes the story infinitely more compelling. It reveals a raw, genuine impulse to mock Mouratoglou's statement, an impulse he acted on before his more calculated judgment took over. That sequence of events is somehow more devastating to the argument than if he had simply left the comment standing. It tells us this take was so profoundly foolish that it shattered Nadal's legendary composure, forcing a reaction before his PR instincts could suppress it for all the world to see. The screenshots of Nadal's laughing emojis exploded across the internet. Everyone was buzzing about Rafa schooling Mouratoglou. The deletion did nothing to quell the fire. It just added a fresh, fascinating chapter to the narrative. Mouratoglou's own defense of his claims has been a spectacle in itself. When fans accused him of having a colossal ego, he retorted, "Much bigger than you, intellect for sure." It was a spectacularly poor choice of words. To answer criticism by attacking someone's intelligence, all while making a glaring grammatical mistake, it should be your. Intellect paints a picture of a man both defensive and small, and it exposes the real game here. Mouratoglou isn't championing this position from a place of sincere, deep analysis. He is engineering a persona as the defiant contrarian, the lone voice unafraid to challenge the established order, the coach who dares to speak the unspeakable. Yet, there is a chasm of difference between challenging dogma with genuine insight and just being thunderously wrong. This is a clear case of the latter. The wider context of this entire firestorm is also critical, as Marotlu has been pushing the narrative for some time that Alcaraz and Sinner signal an evolution that eclipses everything that came before. He claims they are more complete, more gifted, and more awe-inspiring than any generation that preceded them. This is an assertion practically designed to infuriate the legends of prior eras, as it effectively dismisses their life's work as inferior to what is happening today. It's a profoundly disrespectful stance even, if one were to believe it. The real issue, however, is that it simply isn't true, or, at the very least, it's a claim that cannot yet be proven. It's conceivable that Alcaraz and Sinner could forge careers that surpass the big three. They might capture more Grand Slams, sustain dominance for longer, and reach heights we cannot yet fathom. But that is all in the future. They have not accomplished it yet. Their stories are just beginning, not drawing to a close. To compare their current achievements to the entire, legendary careers of the big three is premature at best and willfully deceptive at worst. Nadal is acutely aware of this, which is why he has consistently urged the world to simply savor the Alcaraz rivalry on its own terms, free from the crushing weight of historical comparisons. Let these young men carve out their own legacies, he argues. Let us celebrate their brilliance without diminishing the giants on whose shoulders they stand. But Marot appears constitutionally unable to restrain himself. He must force the comparison. He must proclaim the new era as superior, and he must cast himself as the singular prophet who recognizes that the sport has moved beyond the achievements of the big three. And that is precisely why Rafael Nadal laughed. He laughed at the transparency, he laughed at the disrespect, he laughed at the sheer wrongness of it all, because in the face of such staggering absurdity, mockery is the only logical response. In this affair, the global tennis community has overwhelmingly aligned itself with Nadal. The discourse on social media is a tidal wave of support for the big three, and a storm of condemnation for Marotlu's audacious claim. For those who witnessed the two-decade reign of Djokovic, Nadal, and Federer, the assertion that their tennis was somehow inferior to what's on display now is a hard sell. But were they as swift as the players of today? Perhaps not, considering the evolution of training and nutrition. Did they generate as much raw power on every single shot as the younger generation? Conceivably, no. But the essence of tennis is not found in isolated physical benchmarks. It's about the mastery of the complete craft. It's about tactical decisions, court awareness, strategic depth, chameleon-like adaptability, ironclad mental fortitude, and, of course, flawless execution when it matters most. And in every one of those respects, the big three were, and in Djokovic's case still are, utterly transcendent. To claim they were merely mentally tough without being superior tennis players is to fundamentally misinterpret the source of their greatness. Mouratoglou, of all people, should recognize this. As a coach who has guided elite athletes, he must know that mental strength isn't a separate skill from tennis prowess. It is an inseparable part of its very fabric. The power to perform at your peak under the most crushing pressure is precisely what distinguishes a legend from a very good player. And yet, this is the hill he has chosen to defend. He continues to champion the idea that Sinner and Alcaraz are playing a higher level of tennis, even as Djokovic dispatches them in Grand Slam semifinals. He doubles down on the claim that the Big Three's dynasty was built on psychology more than technical brilliance, and the legends of the game just keep scoffing at him. We see it in Nadal's emojis, we hear it in Murray's laughter, and we read it in Becker's direct refutation. The very people who truly understand the sacrifice and skill required to reach that pinnacle are in complete agreement against him. That fact alone should signal something to Mouratoglou, but judging by his replies, it almost certainly won't. He will go on making inflammatory statements, framing himself as the insightful visionary who sees what the rest of us miss. He will continue to build his brand on shocking opinions that spark outrage. And perhaps that's acceptable. Perhaps tennis needs these kinds of agitators, people who defy convention and make audacious claims. But when those audacious claims are dismantled by a chorus of all-time greats and the simple rules of logic, no one should be surprised when a figure like Rafael Nadal chooses to openly ridicule you. Was Mouratoglou correct in his assessment that Sinner plays a better brand of tennis than Djokovic? Or does this stand as the most misguided opinion in the history of the sport? Should Nadal have kept his emoji comment visible, or was deleting it the right move? And has the modern game truly eclipsed the era of the Big Three? Share your perspective in the comments below, and let's argue it out. Is Mouratoglou a visionary, or is he just spewing nonsense for the spotlight? Hit subscribe, because this argument is far from settled, and we will cover every twist and turn as the legends continue to defend their era. Smash that like button if you believe Nadal's emoji was the perfect comeback. Sometimes, the only fitting response to a truly terrible opinion is mockery. The context of Mouratoglou's comments is also critically important. He delivered these proclamations immediately after Djokovic had once again proven he could defeat the world's best young star in a grueling 5-set epic. This wasn't some quick victory where Sinner had an off day. This was a true clash of titans, where both competitors brought their absolute best, and Djokovic still engineered a path to victory. That scenario is the ultimate rebuttal to Mouratoglou's entire argument. If Djokovic's tennis was truly inferior to Sinner's, and he scraped by on mental grit alone, how can you account for him winning after being a set down? How can you account for the breathtaking shots he executed under duress? How can you account for the tactical adjustments he made all through the match? Mental toughness doesn't paint the lines with winners. It doesn't conjure up perfectly weighted drop shots. It doesn't carve out impossible angles that leave an opponent stranded. Extraordinary tennis skill achieves those things. And Djokovic demonstrated all of that skill against Sinner, not just his infamous resilience. But Mouratoglou can't concede this point, as it would completely demolish his entire narrative. So instead, he retreats to the argument of who won more total points, as if that is the true measure of who was the superior player. Following that line of reasoning, any 5-set match where the loser scored more total points would mean the loser was actually the better player, a conclusion that is patently ridiculous. The reality that numerous members of the Big Three and other tennis icons are unified in their belief that Mouratoglou is wrong should effectively close this discussion. When Nadal, Murray, and Becker are all telling you that your tennis analysis is off, you likely haven't uncovered some profound truth they've overlooked. You are most likely just incorrect, but Mouratoglou has dug his heels in. He is now wedded to this opinion, which suggests we are bound to hear more of it as Alcaraz and Sinner advance in their careers. Each time they claim a title, Mouratoglou will wield it as proof that the modern game has eclipsed the Big Three's era. Each time Djokovic defeats them, he will dismiss it as mere mental strength, triumphing over a technically superior game. And each time, the people who actually competed at that legendary level will either roll their eyes, laugh, or publicly challenge him because they know the truth. They experienced it firsthand. They battled in that era and understand precisely the level of brilliance required just to survive, let alone succeed. The legacy of the Big Three is etched in stone, irrespective of what Mouratoglou proclaims. Nadal has no need to defend it with anything more than a well-placed emoji. Djokovic has no need to respond at all. Federer is enjoying his retirement and has likely not even heard these remarks. Their records and achievements shout louder than any coach's provocative soundbites. Even so, there is a deep satisfaction in seeing Nadal break his typical reserved demeanor just to laugh at an idea so utterly preposterous. It proves that every god has a breaking point. It shows that even a fortress of composure like Rafael Nadal can witness something so profoundly absurd he is forced to show his hand. And in this clash, laughter was his chosen weapon. He needed no fury, no calculated counter-argument, only a devastatingly simple act of ridicule that said more than 1,000 words ever could about Mouratoglou's proclamation. So, is there a shred of truth to Mouratoglou's claim that Sinner's game eclipses that of Djokovic? Or does this stand as the most outrageously flawed analysis in the annals of the sport? Should Nadal have allowed his emoji to stand as a silent testament, or was erasing it the wiser course? And does this herald a new dawn, where modern tennis truly outshines the era of the three titans? Declare your verdict in the comments and let the war of words begin. Is Mouratoglou a misunderstood genius or just a master of provocation chasing relevance? Hit subscribe, because this saga is far from over, and we will track every volley as the legends rise to protect their legacies. And smash that like button if you feel Nadal's emoji response was the perfect checkmate. Because, when confronted with an opinion that defies all logic, ridicule is sometimes the only weapon that makes any sense.